Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and we are so excited today. You know, we're going to be sinking our feet into the world of high school basketball, and I couldn't think of a better coach to kind of get started with than our next guest that we have on today. So I'm going to take a second and read some of the accolades that this coach has under their belt. There's so many. I'm just going to kind of be looking down a little bit. I had to write all this stuff down. I feel like it's a high school paper all over again. So, our coach is the current head coach at Braintree Girls Basketball High School from 2019. The current was a 17-year head coach at Bishop Feehan High School for the boys team. Along with coaching, some of the accolades that this coach has won over the years, it was a 5-time Eastern Atlantic Conference League champion, and there are some great teams that we're going to talk about in that league later on, and you're going to see it's a tough league to be playing in. Was the Mass Basketball Coaches Association Coach of the Year in 2013-2014 season, and was the 2013 Coaches Award for Sportsmanship, the Scully Award. It's given by actually the referees, the officials of basketball. So we're going to be diving into that a little bit more too, because that's an incredible award to be winning. So without further ado today, I'm really excited for our guest here, the head basketball coach at Braintree Girls Basketball, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Freeman.
Hi, Anthony.
How's it going?
Really happy to be here. Appreciate all the work you're doing. It's quite an honor to do a little research on your Beyond X's and O's and have an opportunity to be a part of it. And,
yeah.
I'm kind of humbled because you said your philosophy is to try to find some coaches with, as you call it, compelling stories, I think is the word you use. So I don't know if I rise to that level, but it's an honor to be with you tonight. So thank you very much.
Listen, I'm only here to report the facts, man, and the facts are the facts. So you've done some great things, and we're going to dive into that.
Thank
you. Every coach that I kind of talk to, the first question that I really ask them is just, how did you get into coaching? I mean, I know you were a very good high school basketball player. You played basketball at Williams. You were stud there. So really talk a little bit about how you got started into the world of high school basketball.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In terms of playing career, I played on some really good teams in the high school and college level and NCAA tournaments and state tournaments. I was fortunate to be part of a high school team that made it to the Final Four in the state and played in the old Boston Garden, probably before, when you were in diapers probably, Anthony. And played in some NCAA tournaments at the college level, and always loved the game, was always really passionate about the game. And however, when my college career ended, I kind of just figured I'd play men's league ball for a while and get a quote real job, and that's what I thought I would do. I actually started my career in the insurance business and wasn't particularly successful, and I kind of came on to teaching and coaching almost sort of by accident. I was jobless a few months out of college and started randomly substitute teaching in my local high school, King Philip, where I was living in Rentham at the time. And very, very good friend of mine, Don Byron, who has been the head coach at a number of different schools over the years and is currently at Oliver Ames, had coached me in the Bay State games in high school. And he advertised for a JV job at Walpole High. And I just kind of called him up, hadn't talked to him in a year or two, and asked him if he'd consider having me. And at the same time, a long-term substitute job in social studies opened up for me. And I took that. And the rest is kind of history. I was a JV coach there for a few years and found that I loved it. And I absolutely loved the school schedule, and teaching and coaching sort of blossomed, from there.
Yeah, and that's great. And I know you got your start at Walpole, but you were also able to, after a few years of coaching there, you ended up getting to Bishop Feehan, where you played at high school. And let's just talk about it for a second.
Yep.
You're in the Sports Hall of Fame. You're a 1,000-point scorer, I believe, if I remember off the top of my head, 1,057 points.
Correct. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So 1,000-point scorer is a 1,000-point scorer, and that means you're a very good player. So talk about being a very good player there and then coming back as an assistant. Because I remember I did that at Arlington Catholic, and you come back as a 22, 23-year-old kid, and you're like, oh, I know everything about football. But when you jump into the coaching world, you're like, I don't know anything, right?
Yeah. Well, after I had gotten 4 years of JV under my belt, my high school coach, Leo Sharon, who was still the Feehan coach at that time, knew that I had gone for the Walpole varsity job and had not gotten it, which was, somewhat disappointing. But, it was my first job I'd ever really gone for varsity and didn't work out. So, I was kind of disappointed, but it wasn't like shell shock. It's like, okay, time to move on. And so I had a few months there where I didn't have any coaching job at all. So I didn't really know where I was going at that time. At the same time, the JV coach at Feehan at that time had decided not to come back the following year. So I think it was sometime over that summer, Leo reached out to me and said, hey, I know you don't have a coaching job. You want to come back and help me out at Bishop Feehan, be my JV coach? And I couldn't have said yes fast enough. I mean, I think you'd find a lot of, I think you'd find a lot of guys and ladies who, if you could ask them if they want to be high school coaches and what their dream job might be, it would probably be an honor, they'd say, to go back to their own high school and, and coach there. And there was no exception to that in my case. I jumped at the opportunity. I didn't have any illusions. I thought Leo would be there for a lot more years. And so I just said, this is going to be fun. I get to go back to my school where I have so much pride. And that was a wonderful 2 years of JV experience. And I learned a lot from my high school coach. I saw him in a different light, as opposed to, barking out orders for me to follow as a player. Almost a decade later, it's okay, now I'm actually probing and watching and seeing how he does things and thinking more like a coach as opposed to a player. And after a couple of years, Leo's son had been a senior on the team, and Leo had decided to retire from coaching. And after 6 years of JV, I not for a second did I think that I had all the answers to everything, but I was certainly ready to take the plunge. And again, it's just JV, but I coached over 120 games of JV at that point. I was ready. I wasn't brash. I think I've always been a relatively humble guy, but I was excited. And I thought I knew enough that I could take the reins and produce a competitive team and program and build a program up and hopefully maintain the level that my coach had established, if not take it to an even higher level. So it was daunting, but I was excited. I was thankful for the opportunity, and let the games begin.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's amazing, right? Because, I share that experience with you. I went to Untitled Catholic. I coached there as an assistant for a long time and took over as head coach. And, it's just something about going to high school and coaching at that place and walking the hallways in a different light, and that place produced you, made you, somewhat the person that you are, and you're able to come back and now pass that on. It's a cool experience to share. And I totally understand what you're saying about that. When you take over a program like that, especially where you had such a good relationship with the coach and you play there, what was something you did to kind of blueprint it to be yours? I mean, most coaches that I talk to, they don't change everything, right? They look at the program and they kind of figure out what they want to do. What was that for you?
It's a good question. I think that as a player and to some extent as a JV coach, I was kind of an offensive player. Some might say offensive, but I was a very offensive player. I like to run the floor, I like to shoot the ball, I like the offensive rebound, I like to score, and I never made any bones about that. And I always enjoyed producing players who like to score, and give them a lot of freedom. And the defensive side of the floor, you can ask my former coaches and and maybe some of the coaches I've worked with. Defense was not something that was necessarily my strong suit as a player. I think that carried over into my early years of coaching, where I didn't, I never implemented a lot of that knowledge as a player and a JV coach, but I realized that if I want to be a successful varsity coach, I need to re-emphasize the defensive end of the floor. So I paid particular close attention to how to run a constructive shell drill and defensive transition drills and half-court defense and, post defense and denying the post and boxing out drills. And I really sort of sunk my teeth into those kinds of fundamentals as opposed to just worrying about trying to outscore the opponent. And I realized that, if you could have a better balance, and then the other thing I would say is just the relationships, with the kids. I realized very early in my varsity coaching career that the best, using my psychology background, the way I was going to get the optimal amount of performance out of my players was to develop those interpersonal relationships and try to build team camaraderie. And I, always tried to do a lot of that, in the teams that I've coached, is And it hasn't always been successful. I've had teams that were very, very tight knit and together, and I've had teams that were, a little scattered and not as much so. And there's no question about it. When you have the latter, it's going to be a lot tougher to sort of mold the kind of team and the kind of success that you dream of.
Yeah. And I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? It's not about trying to be something that you're not or trying to be someone else. It's about being you and kind of looking at the talent you have. I mean, that's anybody who takes over a program, they're not going to just always attack the same one or two things. You got to look at your program and evaluate it as a whole. And it seems like you did that. And building a culture is just so important. Like,
it's funny you mentioned that because, the coaches I played for in high school, both Coach Sharon and his predecessor, Ed Gagnon, who I'm still friendly with to this day, they were very old school, tough, hard-nosed types of coaches. If you didn't do something correct, you were going to get hammered for it. And it was a disciplinarian approach. And I took a lot from that as a player. And at the start of my career, I think I tried to mold myself to be that. And after a few years, I realized, well, there's a place for that for me, but that's not really my personality, So I had to kind of mold my coaching career by trying to take the things that I learned from the coaches that I had respected so much, like those gentlemen, but also realizing I had to sort of veer or diverge a little bit with some methodology and philosophy that suited my personality too. And again, I come back to that word, finding a balance. So picking my spots to have that side come out, but also staying consistent to the values that define me.
Absolutely. And like I said, you can't reinvent yourself, right? You got to be who you are and mold around that. What I found really interesting about your story, and just, I'm interested to hear your perspective on it, is I know right out the gate, you had great success. You went 17-5 that first year, but then the next couple of years, I had a guest on here a few weeks back, Dave Fallon, the head coach at Millis High School girls basketball. And, he won a championship his first year. And then 2 years later, he was 1-19. Now that's not you. I'm not saying that's what your record was, but you had a little bit of, you were under 500 a couple times, once or twice. And then you kind of rose back up, and especially in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you started going on some runs. So I'm always interested. What did you kind of change? Because you had such good success early, and then you kind of had a couple, mediocre seasons, and then you kind of jumped right back up. So as a coach, how did you evaluate that and maybe change the way you were a little bit?
Well, first of all, my opinion is I don't really care what coach you talk to. Talent is by far the number one divider. All the ethic is important. Attitude is important. All the intangibles are absolutely critical to getting to, the best you can be. But if you don't have a solid talent base, it's going to be difficult to win, quite frankly. And, we were, relatively 500 team there for probably a good handful of years, from 03 to 07, or somewhere in there. We had a 13-7 in there. We had a 9-11 in there. We had an 11-9. So we were sort of teetering around that 500 mark, always competitive, but how are we going to get to the next level? And I think the number one thing that kind of got my program going to the next level and becoming more premier was simply the fact that I was able to get a really good camp going. My first few years there, the school was still very, very loyal to the coaches who came before me, and they were still running a camp. And they were able to have several weeks, and they had a lot of established campers. And I wasn't able to compete with that. And I hold no grudge. It wasn't something I was thrilled about, but it is what it is. Loyalty. I respect those guys as my former coaches to this day. Something I just kind of had to live with. And once I was able to get a camp going and get youngsters from the area, again, it's a private school. And as you know, the MIAA has some very, very strict and stern policies regarding strict recruitment. And that was something that in my 17 years there, not once did I ever engage in any sort of, recruiting behavior. So I was going to have to build this from the ground up. And I'm sure you know as well as I do, once you establish a good camp and you get, kids from surrounding towns to come to your camp and see what you're all about, you start to build an interest. And we had a group of kids that entered Feehan and in the years like 06, 07, 08, who had been campers. And they took a shine to me in the way that I did things, and they were pretty talented kids. And they came into the school and sort of got the ball rolling, had a couple of those 14, 15, 16 win years. And then we started to get a number more kids who'd come to camp, and they liked it, and they saw that we were winning and hosting tournament games, and they wanted to be a part of that. And it kind of just snowballed from there. And we went on a run from, you have the statistics, but I want to say we went on a run from 09 to about 017, something along those lines, or 016. We won, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 league titles, and, something in the neighborhood of 160 or 100, and that's too many, but maybe 140 something wins or 130 wins in those years. And a number of deep tournament runs. And I think that camp is really, really important, whether it's public school, private school, whatever it is, because that's when you can really get your hands dirty in the summertime and work with kids and let them know that you appreciate the efforts in the summertime, and here's what me and my program are all about. We'd love it if you'd consider coming to the school. And that's the extent of it at that private school. That was so important to me. So.
And that is, I mean, just like, like you said, I understand that world of being a Catholic school, being a private school, and not having that ability to know what's coming into year to year, and you're not recruiting and doing it the right way and getting what you get and building off of that talent. Once you're able to get control of those camps and get some youngsters in there and youth and sell who you are a little bit, that changes any program for any coach. And if you had that at the beginning, you probably would have had that success much later on too, of just having those kids and maybe hearing your terminology or understanding your drills and understanding your style. Those things go a long way, especially when kids are coming from a completely different area or a completely different city or town, or just been taught a lot of different ways. You're somewhat getting them at ground zero, trying to teach them a whole new system from where they come from, and so on and so forth. And
it's funny, a number of the kids who came had been going to the local Catholic elementary and middle schools. So Feehan was a natural choice for some of them. For some of them, they were just public school kids who, took a shine to the school. They came to some games. I remember some kids specifically, I'm not going to mention any names, but who came to some games, and they were exciting games. And their parents told me they really wanted their kids to be a part of that, because they liked the way I coached the games and ran the program and the excitement. And I was a lot younger then, and a little more spry and energetic, but that energy, I think, that I thought was one of my strengths, if you don't mind my saying. I think that really turned people on.
It's awesome. That's great. And so you mentioned statistics. Yeah, I'm going to talk about your statistics for a second. So again, when I take a look at this, you were, and I'm going to read some of your statistics and then your team. So this is, really from like 09. Freeman was a 4-time selection as the Sun Chronicle Boys Basketball All-Star Team Coach of the Year. You were league champ 5 times. In 2009, you had 19 wins, Division II South Tournament quarterfinals. 2012, you had 16 wins. You reached the Division II South quarterfinals again. 2014, you went 21-2 overall and reached the Division II South semifinals. 2015, the very next year, you guys collected 19 wins, and you took them all the way to the Division II sectional title to advance the MIAA Division II tournament. So the winner goes, and you guys lost to Danvers, who, was 27-0 that year and a pretty dominant basketball team. So,
they were, Danvers, that's one of the best high school teams I've ever seen. And we hung in with them at that Garden, but at TD, but Coach Walsh and his programs are always stellar, and there was no shame in losing to them. And to win a sectional, and ironically, the sectional was over my good friend Don Byron, who had given me my first coaching job. The day we played in the Garden, I'll give you another little piece of history, a little piece of irony, was literally 25 years to the day that I had played in the Garden as a player in 1990. It was 2015. Wow. Second Tuesday in March. So things kind of confluenced on that night. Unfortunately, we lost both games, but it was quite a history there. And then I'm sure you'll mention 2016 also, another good year.
Yeah. And so, when I look at that, I say to myself, what we talked about earlier, you definitely built a culture. You built a culture that was second to none. And you kind of mentioned when you took over those camps, and then now you're seeing the after effects of it, especially in the 2010s.
The other thing was I always get my players working at the camps. So it's a strategy a lot of coaches use. You get your players at the camps working with the young kids. A lot of those camps, they run themselves. You get, the young kids, I mean, they like to see me there, but they like working with the kids who are in the program now and the kids they look up to and the kids they want to be like. And, oh, that kid played in the Garden. I want to do that someday. You know, that means a lot. That means a lot, you know.
And so, I mean, that's a cool aspect of it, right? Because think about it. I mean, these campers are, you know, these basketball players are working at these camps. These little kids are like, I want to be like Johnny, number 16. I want to be like Mike when, you know, so they see these guys at a young age and they're looking up to them. And now they're putting that uniform on or maybe wearing that number and playing that position as that person that they looked up to in camp. So yeah, that's all great culture building. You know, where you had a lot of success, Coach, I always ask a lot of coaches this, but talk about what your expectation is in the off season for your team. You know, are you the type of coach that it's AAU, you want them continuing to play basketball, or are you the type of coach that wants them just to play other sports, be competitive, be athletes, and put themselves in those competitive situations year round? Or is it a mix of both?
It's a good question. I have always been a proponent that if kids, they get 4 years of high school, if they want to play other sports, by all means. And if you're talking specifically about the off season, you know, if it's the fall or the spring and these kids are playing another sport, there should be their focus. And I don't want to see any kid ever get hurt playing basketball during another season where that might compromise their ability to compete with that team, especially if it's at the school that I'm coaching at, you know. In terms of the summer, there were a lot of kids who played multiple sports, so we have to balance their time. What we always had was a summer league we were in down in Taunton under Coach Dacey. We ran a great summer league down there, and we usually play 2 nights a week for 6 or 7 weeks. And some kids might make it 1 out of the 2 games because they might have a baseball, the summer baseball. I forget what it's called. What's the baseball for the high school kids who are good players? There's a summer baseball that goes on. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or maybe they were at a football passing camp or passing league or whatever. Okay, hey, can you make it 1 out of 2 or talk to that coach of that sport and say, hey, what kind of commitment are you expect? Can we work something out here? Because, you know, I just always felt like it wasn't my place to tell a kid he can't do something else. But if the coaches can communicate and try to share these kids' time a little bit, because we're all caring about our own programs. But I always cared about I tried to care about the other programs as well, because I wanted all the school to do well, not just boys basketball. But at the same time, I would say, and in the sport of basketball, I can't speak to other sports because I don't have the knowledge. But in the sport of basketball, if you want to have a good team that's going to be successful, you kind of do need at least a couple of kids, you know, who that sport, you know, is their focus. And that's not something I mandated, but that's just a point of fact. So I was very, very fortunate during that really strong run we had that usually each year I had 2, if not 3 boys on the team who happened to be my best players, who basketball was their focus. So they were really putting a lot of time into either AAU or finding time for summer league, or I'd open up the gym, literally go into the office, roll out the balls, open up the gym, which we're allowed to do by MIAA, and the kids could play and whatnot. And when they said they were done, you get 10 or 15 kids and play pickup. And when they were done, okay, coach, we're done. All right, lock up the gym and get the heck out of there. And that was always made myself available, except if I was on vacation with my family or if I was sick or something like that. But other than that, you know, I always tried to make myself available in the summer to give these kids as many opportunities to play as they could. We used to do some camps. High school camps for basketball are kind of sort of a thing of the past, going a little bit by the wayside. But back then there were still some really good camps going on. So we did a team camp every once in a while. And we did it for a few years in a row, and then some groups didn't really want to do it, so it kind of got phased out. But those are some of the things we did, and I think all of those were important ingredients to the program getting to the high heights that it did.
Yeah. And it, like you said, I love listening to other sports because they are so different, and to hear how coaches handle and manage their players in the off season and what they do and what the expectation is. And just hearing basketball, you know, there's a lot out there, you know, there's a lot out there for kids to do nowadays. And, you know, that's amazing from maybe even when I was in high school, there really wasn't, like you said, maybe camps but there wasn't too much summer league. It was, but not a lot as much as there is now. You know, when we talk about your schedule, I mean, when we say you're 500 or sub 500, I mean, let's also not underestimate and talk about the league that you guys play in. I'm just going to name a few of the teams. And, if I leave a few teams off, no disrespect, but I'm just looking at some of the traditional powerhouses that you guys would play against. And again, it's 2 times a season, a home and away, that you're playing some of these teams. Again, Bishop Sting, Walpole, Martha's Vineyard, Attleboro, North Attleboro. And then over the years, just doing some research on you, you've played teams like Catholic Memorial, New Bedford, Dartmouth, Durfee. I mean, these are really good programs. So, your league's a gauntlet in itself, but you don't seem to really shy and back away from really talented teams, no matter what division they are. So talk a little bit about the mentality of you as a coach and how you look at maybe scheduling your non-league games before you start playing like the thick of your league.
Sure. Well, for years we had a league schedule of 12 games, and some of the teams in that league were stronger than others, as always, but those 12 games weren't going to change. The EAC that I was a part of sort of went up and down. Some teams left, others came in. It was sort of came to be a bit of a fledgling league after a while, and ended up, going by the wayside. In terms of non-leagues, I wasn't going to just schedule 8 games against Division I powerhouses. Usually we scheduled a few games against some good D1s. We always scheduled Attleboro because that was a natural rivalry. Always North Attleboro because that was a natural rivalry. Durfee, we had played Durfee since I think 1981 or something, or 82, something like that. Always played them home and away. So there's 5 games right there. And then over the years, just sort of sprinkled in, as you said, in my early years. We didn't play CM and BC High so much in my later years, but we played them in the tournament a couple times. We played them my first 2 years. And the other schools you mentioned, we played Dartmouth, who had some really good teams. I'm trying to think. We were in a number of holiday tournaments, even some good Catholics. Cardinal Spellman, Mike Perry, and one of the best. He's got over 500 wins and had some great teams. We dip into the Hockomock League and play Foxborough, who my former player of mine, John Gibbs, is an outstanding young coach and has done great things in his first handful of years there. We played them. And just, it wasn't so much, I'm not going to shy. I'm going to play anybody who wants to play us. Well, within reason. If your team is sort of a mediocre team, you don't want to go 5-15 and not give yourself a chance to compete in your own division. But at the same time, you don't want to be 17-3 and have played nobody, and now you're a sitting duck in the tournament, paper tiger. Didn't want that either. So it was a little bit tricky. There were some years I had to schedule, when teams started dropping out of the EAC, I had to schedule more non-league games. There were some years I had to get 12, if not 14 non-league games. So there were times when we were strong that it was actually kind of hard to get games because, unless I wanted to just riddle my schedule with a ton of D1 powerhouses and, again, trying to find that balance. So I'm not ashamed of the schedules that I ever put together at that school because I was always trying to find that way of being successful, being competitive, but also challenging ourselves so that when we did face good teams in the tournament, we'd be able to compete. And we got it handed to us in all my years, maybe a couple of times in tournament play. But we were in it. We were in it in those games, almost every time we played in the tournament. And really proud of that. Really proud of that postseason record.
Yeah, and I think again, teams, a lot of the basketball coaches I've talked to, it's a lot of the same mentality. They want to prepare themselves for tournament play. And in the case, bringing up Dave Fallon again, his conference, his league, he was playing Division II teams when he was a Division IV team. So yep. He would sometimes get in at a 500 record, but he was the most dangerous team in the Division IV tournament because they just played superior competition. So I love the mentality, coach. It's just the idea of saying to yourself, yeah, we're going to play up a little bit. We're going to put ourselves to see what my team's made of. And like in any sport, I don't care what sport it is, you want to find out the mental toughness of your team. Period.
No question.
You want to put them in positions in which they got to be clutch or make a play or make a shot or make a defensive play or get a big rebound. And you want to do it against the best, because like you said, it gets you ready. 12 games in your league gets you ready, but playing those other out of league teams, some of those bigger schools that you want to show your kids, you can play with them.
A lot of schools that have 16, 18 league games every year, they don't have to schedule much out of league because their schedules are pretty much established. I didn't really have that luxury the last, 8 to 10 years of my career there. And, I had to sort of venture out at times, sometimes geographically to find games. And some of that was fun, but it got kind of grueling after a while. I'm happy to see that my alma mater is now in that Catholic league. Just from a scheduling standpoint, it's nice to see for convenience and not having to schedule as many non-league games from this point forward. I'm assuming the pandemic will be over by next year. So it's nice to see that that's the case there. So I'm happy for them for that.
Except the drive. Except the drive.
Yeah, I guess there's some long drives. I don't know. I'm a bit removed from it at this point, but I guess there's some really long drives there and whatnot. But being the trade-off is worth it for that Catholic league.
So you alluded to it a little bit ago, but another thing we talked about, and I did a little research, your coaching tree. I mean, you're like a Bill Belichick, Andy Reid-esque here. You got a little bit of a coaching tree. You have the head coach at King Philip, the head coach at Xaverian, and as you mentioned, the head coach at Foxborough. So, I mean, talk about that a little, because that's a compliment, coach. I mean, in any sport, if you have guys that you're grooming that are under you, and yes, they might have it and they might have the knowledge and they're hardworking and they got there in their own right, but they followed under you. They learned under you. They were able to take that step under you. So talk about how special that is to have a coach.
One caveat. A couple of those guys, they didn't. I mean, only Coach DeStefano at KP actually coached with me, but the other guys played for me, and they all have assistant coaches who played for me. So you're talking 6, 7, 8 guys who are coaching high school basketball in Eastern Mass, in the Catholic Conference, in the Hockomock League, et cetera, who I had in some way, shape, or form, player, coach, but were sort of under my tutelage. And, I can't even begin to tell you how much pride that gives me to see guys that went to my high school, played for me, coached with me, who now I have coached against, were some tremendous players, but also just tremendous young men, gentlemen, absolute gentlemen, great sportsmen, who love the game and have a passion for the game, just like I do. And if I have had any influence on those young men as players, as a mentor, as coaches or whatnot, then I'm honored. Because I think the world of every one of those guys. Coach Lindbergh at KP and Coach Adams, who's Ryan's assistant at Xaverian. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So when you have a chance to get to know people so on such a personal level as their coach, or in David's case, he was a volunteer assistant for me for 7 years. And what an honor to have them go forward and try to continue coaching in the sport that they love. And I went to some of the games last year that they had, and boy, it was just so impressive to see them building their own craft. And I'm not sure I influenced them all that much as coaches, but I certainly tried to as men, and how to conduct themselves and sportsmanship and try to be classy and just treat the kids real well. And I tried to rub those things up. Those are always much more important to me than what the scoreboard said, at the end of the night.
Yeah, and it's awesome. I mean, again, you talk about earlier building that culture. I mean, you hear players come through your program, and they might have went on and played at college, but again, you had the root and made them fall in love with the sport and learn that sport, and here they are now doing what you did for them, for others. So
thank you.
That's what's coaching is just so amazing. And I think that it's such an emotional thing. You connected with your players. I mean, I have players that since I've started this have been emailing me, calling me, texting me. I had even someone send a letter in the mail. I mean, super old school, right? But like
snail mail.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing the effect that you have on your players, and to see that, only people that coach really understand that how that makes you feel as an individual when you see that. So tip the cap to you, Coach.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit style. I'm just curious. This is more me as a fan that doesn't know a lot about basketball. Just I can watch it and follow it. But as far as the X's and O's go, I'm not there. I'm not your guy. But
you'd see me try to look at a football pattern. I have no clue what I'm looking at.
So what I always find interesting about basketball is your bench, right? Because from what I understand and see and watch, I mean, typically I'm guessing teams are 7 guys to 8 guys, maybe consistently in a rotation. That playing a game, but then you maybe have those 9 through 12 guys sitting on the bench. I mean, talk about how you build a roster 1 through 12 for your program.
Sure. Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. In any varsity team, you can usually, at least in my career, could bank on 7 to 8 top guys, maybe a 9th in a given year, but we could keep up to 15. I usually tried to keep around 12. Some years I had more, some years I had less if I didn't have a lot of bodies. But it can absolutely at the varsity level get a little dicey with guys 10, 11, 12, 13, maybe even 9. Some of those really strong teams I had, you know, our top 7 or 8 were really, really strong. And, you know, to some extent, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get as many kids a lot of playing time as I, you know, maybe my heart would have wanted to. But, you know, at the varsity level at that stage, you're committed to winning. And that was my first commitment, other than hopefully providing a good experience, was we're trying to win games here. And it's not charity. You know, it's an opportunity to hopefully produce a good product, give yourself a chance at state tournament play, and then really test your mettle and see how far you can go. So, you know, I always tried to be very respectful to the kids who maybe weren't going to get the same number of minutes, but you know how it is. It's those first few weeks when you let a kid know, here's where you stand, because I always tried to take the honesty approach with kids who were sort of on the fringe or maybe weren't looking a lot of minutes, and, you know, here's where you are, you know, just so that they can make best informed decisions for themselves. And you try to take the honest approach. And for some kids that works, and coach, I'm all in, you know, and for some kids it ends up burning you because they're all in at the start, but those cold winter January mornings of Saturday practice at 8 a.m. start happening. Their motivation isn't what it was on December 6th. And so it can be a grind trying to find that balance between showing respect to those bottom bench guys and also saying, well, you know, I have a goal here. We're trying to win every game, you know. So that was something I definitely struggled with internally over the years. I think there's probably a lot of coaches who do. But that's just, you know, I guess I have a heart, you know. I try to care about all the players, but unfortunately, oftentimes the way you're perceived is dictated by the amount of playing time that every single kid gets. And unfortunately, in this profession, when you sign on, you know that to some extent you're going to be judged based upon, you know, some objective factors like that, like playing time. And it's unfortunate that, you know, it's unfortunate that sometimes, you know, folks can't see the forest, you know, for the trees. But I've also had a number of wonderful folks over the years who I never heard a word. In fact, they were ultra supportive, even though their children weren't highlighters, weren't headliners and star players. So some of that is dictated year to year. Some of the years when we're not as strong, maybe that gets some more kids opportunities. Or the years than you really were, if you're winning by a large amount, you can get kids in who don't. But they know the deal on that. They know that they're really only getting those minutes, you know, because the team is either up big or down big. And it's not a mystery. I just always felt honesty was the best approach. And I guess some kids felt like I had already given up on them if I told them where they stood at the end of tryouts. But I continued on with that process, and I think for the most part, it served me pretty well. You know?
Yeah. And I think when you coach too, you know, especially if you are, let's say that 9 through 12 kid, you know, you also find out what that kid's kind of made of a little bit. Maybe it's a younger guy towards the end of the bench, or maybe it's a more older guy, a junior or a senior, but you also kind of find out a little bit about who they are. And I've seen in football, I mean, I've had kids who started, you know, day 1, by week 6 or week 7, they're maybe not starting and somebody else is, or some kid who wasn't getting any reps is now getting way more reps as the season goes on, maybe due to injury or maybe just due to, you know, they're making themselves known at practice and we're giving them some time and they're understanding the system. So, you know,
I think that can absolutely happen in basketball as well. Yeah. I mean, and, you know, contrary to what some folks believe, I never gave up on anybody, but, you know, if other kids are performing better on a regular basis than in practice, and that's really where you see it, you know, if a kid wants to move up the ladder, move up the food chain, it's going to happen in practice. And if a kid's feeling defeated because they haven't been getting chances, that might affect their demeanor and their performance in practice, which isn't going to help. So they'll help their situation. So you got to keep trying the positive reinforce. You got to try and keep building them up, because if they get better, we're going to be better. So it was never, oh, I hope this kid doesn't get better because it'll make my life easier. No, make us coaches have to make those tough decisions, because that means the team is getting better.
Absolutely. And And kind of transitioning into the next thing, and I hope I don't mess this up, so correct me if I'm wrong here. One of the awards you won was that sportsmanship award, and I think it was in 2013. It's called the Scully Award. I'm going to let you explain it a little bit more because I will not do it justice, but it's a pretty big honor, and I think it's something really worth mentioning because as a coach, I respect that a lot because I know it's not the easiest to keep your temper and keep your calmness when you're coaching and you're in that competitive nature. So talk a little bit about the award and how you got recognized for it.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to talk about this. Paul Scully was a longtime commissioner of IAABO, Official of Referees, Board of Official Referees, Board 30. I think it was based out of Taunton, where Paul lived, and they had an inaugural sportsmanship award for coaches in 2013. And they decided that they were going to start giving an award on a yearly basis to one coach from all the different schools that they officiate, from all the different leagues they officiate. There had to be 40, 50, maybe even 60 schools that they represented in their officiating. And I received a call from the secretary of the officials at the time. And I don't usually receive calls from referees, but so I said, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" I knew the guy. He had refereed games when I was in high school. And he said, "Oh, I want to share some good news with you." I had no idea that he hadn't even had the award before. And he explained to me the purpose of the award and that they were going to honor me with it. Their inaugural award, the first time they were going to give it out, they were honoring me with it. And I've been in the game now, coaching head coach now, I think it was 11 or 12 or 13 years at that point. And I was absolutely stunned. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here. That's anybody who knows me, I think knows I'm a pretty humble guy. But he said that just the way that I treated the game and the opposing teams and the players on the other teams respectfully, and in their mind, most importantly, the referees, and always had a good cordial working relationship with the referees. And I think I told you in the article, they said I had one T and one technical in 17 years, and that's because I had put the wrong number of a kid in the scorebook. But I just never really felt that the officials were responsible for, largely for the results in games that we played. Sure, there were a few games where I wish a few calls had gone the other way, but there were also games, I'm sure, that we had some calls that went our way. But either way, through the highs and lows, the ups and downs of games and the roller coaster ride that the season is, I've really always been just sort of hands off on the officials. I think we need to work together. I don't consider it, brownie points or trying to get in good with them. It was never really that way. It was just my personality. I always felt that if I was worrying too much about all the calls those guys were making and nitpicking and whatnot, and yelling and screaming, that was focus that I was taking off of my own team and what we need to accomplish in the heat of the game, in the heat of the battle. So I learned very, very early on in my career that, it doesn't really do my team and my players much good to model the kind of behavior where I'm adversarial with the officials. That's just never really been a part of who I was. And I'm not saying everybody should be that way. I'm just saying that's who I was. And to receive that honor, I brought a couple of kids with me to the next board meeting that they had, a couple of my captains that year. And because I was very, very proud of that award. And I've had my share of success on the scoreboard, but I can unequivocally say that the proudest moment of my coaching career has been receiving that Scully Award. And there really isn't even a close second. Maybe winning the sectional and going to the Garden, but beyond that, I just thought that was the pinnacle. I thought that was the pinnacle, and it just meant so much to me. And another little touch of irony there is that I work at Braintree High School where I coach, and the principal of Braintree High School, who was hired 2 or 3 years ago, is a man by the name of Dr. Chris Scully from Taunton, and that's Paul's son. Wow. So it's just weird, this confluence of different things that occur. And he's a great, great guy, and we're so happy and lucky to have him as our headmaster.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's my sense of the award, and just what an honor. And I was really proud of it.
As you should be. I mean, listen, I'm not sitting here being like, oh, this guy's floating his own boat. I'm like, yeah, this is a heck of an award. And that's why I really wanted to give you the floor to talk about it. It shows the type of guy you are. And again, alluding back to your coaching tree, right? Let's talk about it. I mean, you have some successful players under you and, people that coach with you are off. So again, the way that you conduct yourself, the culture that you have there, it shows because it's spreading and it's affecting other programs. But I agree with you. It's an amazing award.
Thank you.
Well-deserved. Just getting to know you. You're just such a nice guy, humble guy, easygoing guy. And yeah, I really wanted to give you that. I thought that was really important for our audience to hear, the type of
that means a lot to me, Anthony. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I'm going to jump into this next subject and obviously I'm going to give you the floor again to kind of talk about it. And one of the big things I research, I research a lot of these coaches is of all the success that I named, again, sectional championships or semifinals or quarterfinals, 20-win seasons, so on and so forth. And again, coaching at your alma mater, so on and so forth. You at the 17 years in Feehan after your, I believe it was the 17-18 season, you kind of let go as coach. And it really stood out to me because I did research and I read some newspaper articles. I read the Herald, I read the Sun Chronicle. And the biggest thing that I kept coming back to was there was really no explanation of why. I mean, you average 15 wins a year. I want to say you won like 240 games. Am I in the ballpark there?
I was a win shy of 250.
Okay, so 240.
My first win at Braintree was 250 last year.
Yeah. So record speaks for itself. You double the amount of wins and you did losses. You played an extremely tough conference. You win an award that you conduct yourself incredible on the sideline. You have an awesome coaching tree. You're 1,000-point scorer. I mean, I'm not trying to paint this picture here, but I'm just being real. I'm going to read some of the quotes, that I found in the paper. And I think this is really important for kind of my research. So this was kind of the quote from the AD, and I'm not knocking anybody. I'm not knocking the school. I'm just kind of reading what I read in the paper, or the article that I read. We are grateful for Coach Freeman in his many years of service. He's always represented Feehan well, and he's been an excellent role model for the entire generation of Feehan basketball players. Very true. Matt is a man of character and positive role model. As a Feehan graduate and a storied Feehan coach, he will be a part of our Feehan family forever. So when I first read that, I thought maybe you retired or something. Or you just decided to kind of you were done, And then the more I researched it, even people that were writing the article, is just kind of baffling on what happened. And according to you, there really wasn't a reason given. I mean, some of the quotes here, again, humble that you are, the type of guy that you are. I mean, most people in that situation might tell how they feel. And, I still love Bishop Feehan and always will. I'm just extremely disappointed in the people that made the decision. I love coaching this team. The kids were great. Worked hard every single day, and we had a great time doing it. So again, I'm going to kind of give you the floor here, but I want to give you that opportunity to talk about it and kind of hear your side of the story a little bit, where I've done this research and really haven't heard that side of it.
Sure. I'm not even sure I'd say it's my side of the story, that there is really no debate about, kind of what happened. It was an unfortunate thing. I think clearly you hit the nail on the head in terms of, we're 2.5 approaching on almost 3 years later in April. And other than speculation from some different sources, some more or less reliable than others, there really has never been an honest explanation provided to me by the powers that be, by upper administration. I think that's unfortunate. I think that we're starting to see a little bit of this more and more over the years in high school sports. Oftentimes, it's fairly well known what the reason is, even though it's not a very good reason. But, the lingo that's used these days, and was in my case, was deciding to go in another direction, or, we've decided to, go, take our coaching search, somewhere else and start fresh, or things of that nature. But I guess the thing that probably hurt most of all was, as I was being laid off, I could tell, and the athletic director was not able to make eye-to-eye contact with me, because I think he deep down inside knew that this was not right, and I'm the psych teacher, I'm the psychology guy. You can kind of tell people's body language, and as much as I pressed for, hey, I was a distinguished alum for 30 years of affiliation in my high school, and I never did anything to disparage that. And I thought at an absolute minimum, just at an absolute minimum, I deserved an honest explanation. Was there something I did? Did I say something to a kid that was taken out of context or taken the wrong way? I never laid a hand on any kid except in a supportive way. I was always amenable to what admin and others, ADs wanted from me. And I always tried to demonstrate, the utmost in class and sportsmanship, win or lose, whatever. And it hurt. It really, really hurt. And you don't expect that not only when you've had success on the scoreboard in tangible, objective ways, but when you've tried real hard to lay a foundation of who you are and be a man of character and someone that you can look in the mirror and be proud when I see my face. And that was always how I felt about I liked who I was, and when that happened, there were a lot of resultants from that firing. It affected me and my family in some really grave ways, some real serious ways. It was, I wasn't a real fun guy to be around for a long time. I didn't come out of the house a whole lot for a while. I uprooted my family and moved from North Attleboro, which is my hometown, to Medway. My daughters were going to be legacies at Bishop Feehan, and I was really excited to have them go. And they'd always come to my games as young kids, and they were really excited about the school and loved the school just as much as I did. And it just became. At the time, I just felt like it was such a toxic situation for me that it wasn't the right time. My daughter was going to be a freshman the following year and was enrolled, and my wife and I just decided this is not the right time and environment for our daughter right now, because I didn't want her to start off with a bad experience because of something that happened to me. I didn't think that would be fair to her, and so yeah, I think hurt. I think hurt was the number one thing, and I just feel like in general, whether it's coaching, whether it's any kind of job, when people quote decide to go in another direction, I think the people that are losing their jobs, I think they deserve the respect of at least having some specifics. Was it a parent? Was it a group of parents? Was it And that's it's something that I had to get over, and I largely did, but it still sits with me. I won't lie, it still sits with me. It still stings a little bit, not like it did at the time, because I've had to move forward with my career and go into some new avenues, which I've done. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't still have an effect on my life to some extent. It does, but I still behind the scenes hope that the program does well. And a lot of those kids that are in the program right now, they're seniors. They had all come to my camp, and they're very, very good players and wonderful young men. And I had really looked forward to coaching them. And it just wasn't meant to be. And that's kind of my initial comments on that. Anything else on my part, even to this day, would largely be speculation. I think that central administration already kind of had a mindset that this is what they wanted to do. And we're kind of just looking for the right time or opportunity. My last year, I will say, we were 11-9 with a team that many people who were friends of mine in the coaching community said, "Oh man, if you can get this team anywhere near 500, you deserve Coach of the Year." We went 11-9 and got in the tournament and gave a really, really good Hanover team a good half of basketball. They ended up running away from us in the second half at Hanover, and that was my last game. And I still remember it and those boys, very, very well. And I always appreciate and respected the boys on that team because they worked really hard. And as you said in that article, I truly enjoyed working with that group. I thought we overachieved, and I always thought that was a mark of at least a decent coach. You can get a little bit more out of the team than maybe what was expected.
Yeah. And I appreciate you, talking about that. I know that, listen, coaching's an emotional sport, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's emotional. You invest a lot into the kids, you invest into, the season, the off season, the weight room, making sure they're doing well in class, and you have that connection with them, that you have that side that you're friendly with them too, and that you really do care about them. So I know that that's tough. And I know that wasn't easy, and, no knock. I'm not trying to knock the school or anything like that, but
I'm not either.
I think that you're such a, you're a great coach, so it was something that I was just, wanted to bring up on the show and really talk to.
And if I could just add, one additional thing. I mean, I think as hurtful as it was to lose the job that was my dream job and that I cherished and treated with the utmost of respect, and I feel I did. I think the fact that I really don't have any relationship with my high school at this point is tough, because I did love and adore that school for over 30 years. I haven't been back on the campus since the day I was allowed, a few days after I got fired, I was allowed to come back and say goodbye to the boys who were going to be coming back in the program the next year. And I mean, I did that with tears in my eyes. So that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life, And since that day, I haven't been back to the school or been back on campus. That's something that'd be really hard for me to do. That would be particularly emotional, I think. And that's kind of too bad, because I had, when I lost my job, everybody associated with the school, the higher ups were like, we'll stay in touch. We'll always keep your name good. I haven't heard from anybody in upper admin or affiliated with administration in that school since that last day. And that kind of hurt. That kind of hurt, and I don't know. I guess that's probably where I'll leave it. It's tough, because when you have such a wonderful experience at your high school, you want to feel great about it forever, and you always want some of that tingle to stay with you. And definitely some of that's been lost, and that's unfortunate. Maybe someday I can get those feelings back again and reaffiliate on some level. But I in the present, I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, and again, I think it's important for the audience to hear that, coaching is an emotional thing. I mean, like I said, you're invested into it. And, when things don't go your way, it's tough. It's tough for people to understand that, because out of those 365 days a year, I mean, arguably over 300 days a year, you're investing into it and you're not getting paid for that, so it's just amazing what coaches do. And, you were able to bounce back on your feet pretty quickly, and you went over to your I
coached almost, I mean, let's just run the numbers. I mean, including tournament play, I think the number of games I coached there was approaching 400 if you added up the numbers. High threes. That's a lot of sweat. That's a lot of tears. That's a lot of joys, a lot of wins and some losses, some glorious wins and some devastating losses, but no loss is that devastating, and no win is that great that you can't try to keep yourself centered, and so that's a lot of investment of love and time and energy. And I don't have any regrets. I mean, I made mistakes over the years. And in some cases I took my lumps for them, but I always owned up to them, and I tried to make amends. And in some cases I was able to, and in some cases I wasn't. But, I made mistakes, but I also got a lot of things right, and that's kind of.
Yeah. And as we heard, you got a lot of things right. We heard it. But you were able to bounce back on your feet. And I think, sometimes things happen for a reason. And as weird as it might seem, and you haven't aligned the stars quite yet to why it happened, you ended up with coaching as an assistant that following year under Ricky Grady, who is, a good friend of yours, a Dover Sherborne, and you win a state championship. So I'm going to ask you this in two parts, because doing my homework a little bit. Part one, talk about what you kind of learned. I mean, you were a head coach for a really long time. You coach underneath somebody. They win a state championship. I mean, talk about maybe what you learned a little bit as being an assistant coach. And then I want to talk about that championship game, because ironically enough, it was against Bishop Stang, who you play in your league. So obviously you add a lot of value there. You
can't make this stuff up, Anthony. So you just can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, it's cool. So, I mean, your story is just so interesting, and it just carries over.
Rick Grady is a very, very good friend of mine. We coached against each other in tournament play. We'd worked together at summer camps, Rising Star Camp, and whatnot. We were very, very close. Anyway, and I had applied for a couple of varsity jobs the spring that I lost my job, and I didn't get either job, even though I was a finalist. So I was kind of I was kind of a coach without a position throughout the summer. And a couple of coaches that I didn't know as well had asked me if I wanted to come on board, and I said, I think I'm just going to sit this out for now. And when I moved to Medway, Rick also lives in Medway, which is also ironic. And Rick's just a super first-class guy in my estimation. And he kind of just very, very calmly and coolly said that his varsity assistant wasn't coming back, and he asked me if I might want to come on board. And at first I said, I don't think so, Rick. And he kind of sweetened the pot by telling me a little about the team and what their goals were. And he had a bunch of seniors coming back, and that was the age group that I was accustomed to being with. And ultimately he said, why don't you just give it a try? We'll give it and I said, okay. And I was fortunate enough that the athletic director at Dover Sherburne at the time was a man named Jeff Parcells, who's a real good friend of mine. And we've become, really close friends over the years, for these last couple of years. And he rubber stamped it, and we talked about the Feehan thing. We talked about it all, and Jeff's a guy who's always going to do his homework on things, and he trusts Rick and he trusts his coaches. And those two giving me this opportunity, I'll always be indebted to them for that, because the run we went on was really the stuff of legend. And, as an assistant coach, I guess I just tried to think about in my mind, in all my years of coaching, I had a few different assistants, not too many. I was pretty fortunate to have some guys who were my assistant for pretty consistent guys for a number of years. What qualities would I want in an assistant coach? And that is loyalty above all else. It's not good to have an assistant coach who's always questioning everything you do behind your back. That's just disloyalty. You can't have that. So I pledged my loyalty to Rick from day one. And I just said, you know what? I would want coaches who are constantly bombarding me with possibilities. Hey, want to try this? Hey, what do you think about? And if he never tries any of them, no problem. And if he tries every one of them, okay. But and Rick would pick and choose some suggestions. But Rick's his own man and a wonderful coach. And so if he took something that I suggested, I was flattered by it. And we just had a real great symbiotic relationship, between the two of us, and played off each other well. I was kind of the humorist on the staff, just trying to keep the kids loose before games, because I always thought that was an important skill of an assistant, not make it all feel like the walls are caving in just because we have a little adversity, or not allowing them to feel, too pumped after a win, but, keep things in perspective. And just developed a real good relationship in my own right with a lot of the boys that were on that team. And it just became a real honor, and as far as the season was concerned, we were having a solid year anyway. I think we were in the neighborhood of 11-4 or 12-4 or something like that. We went on a little run at the end of the regular season to finish 15-5. And we went into the tournament with reasonable expectations. Hey, we got to get a home game. Let's get a home win. I don't want to speak for Rick on this, but I think he'd feel the same way. Let's get a home win, and let's see what the next round brings. And we had a chance to play Whitensville Christian on the road on the second round, and we went over there and really just had a tremendous defensive performance. And then we were on to the semifinals at WPI and played Sutton, who was outstanding, and just kept the train rolling and won the next two games, and actually pretty convincing at Worcester State. And then we're on to the state finals. Wow, And I had never gotten that far. I'd gotten to the semis. I'd never gotten to the state finals. And it was at Holy Cross. And wouldn't you know it, we're playing against Coach Santos and Bishop Stang, just a tremendous team, tremendous program. And he won a state title in 2016, I think. It's funny, he had won a state title in 2016. I think they were something like 22-2 or 23-3 or something like that. And two of their losses were to us that year. And he had won the Division III state title. And we had gone to the Division II game at the Garden. So yeah. two pretty good teams in our league. And so I knew some of the kids were the same. Some of their best players were the same kids that I coached against since they were freshmen at Stang. Very, very good players. And I kind of went back and looked at some of my notes and watched some film and looked at tendencies and whatnot. And I make no illusions about anything. We didn't win that title because of me. Okay, I was a side piece and knew my role. But a couple little matchup things here and a couple little defenses that they liked there, and it helped. I think it helped us put together a good game plan. And if that played a small piece in victory in that game, then that's tremendous. That's tremendous. But what an honor to be part of that program for a year with Rick and Jeff, and I'm just so proud to call them really good friends of mine. And they allowed me to have an exceptional year after what had been a really, really difficult year in my life. So it kind of resurrected my my mood and my momentum and my desire to get back into coaching at the head coaching level.
Yeah. And so, I mean, then hearing what you said earlier, this is all kind of connecting the dots. So, then you've been a teacher at Braintree since 97, I think you said to me.
97, 98 was my first year there.
There you go. Right. So here you are as a teacher there, well-respected teacher. And now all of a sudden the girls' job opens up. And we know the history of the girls program there. They're pretty dominant in the, mid 2010s. So, later 2010s and probably before that, but just doing my homework a few years back. So taking over a pretty good program. I know that lost a slew of talent the years before, but talk about how that opportunity popped up for you to land in the spot that you teach at. So it's not a long commute for you. You probably have some of these kids in class. So
I do.
Talk about it.
Well, Coach McDonald, I mean, clearly legendary women's coach who's now chosen where she works in guidance at Norwood to be the boys coach.
Unbelievable.
And is doing a fine job there. Hasn't skipped a beat. For her own reasons, we haven't really talked about her reasons. I think it was just because she wanted to go to Norwood for convenience and challenge herself with some new challenges after having been such a dominant coach on the girls' side, and just had some wonderful Braintree girls teams throughout the decade, numerous state titles and whatnot. And coaching girls wasn't something that was ever really on my radar. I mean, I coached boys for 24 years, and I had a comfort zone, especially in that job that we've talked about. But I basically told Rick I was probably going to be one and done, and I was going to start looking around. I suppose if nothing had come out, I might have gone back there. But, the girls' job opened up, and initially it didn't really pique my interest. I was kind of like, all right, let's see. I don't really know any of the girls on the team. They had a number of very good players who graduated and played college or playing college ball now. And so initially it was kind of like, all right, let's see who the next coach is that comes along or whatnot. And got to talk with my really good friend, Bob Crook, who's the legendary boys coach at Braintree. And he tried to sort of sweeten the pot for and tell me a little bit about how great it would be for us to work together, and which it has been, and things of that nature. And just tried to do a little research about the players, where they were coming back, and the convenience of already being in the building, and thinking philosophy of how that could work in, to my advantage or work in my favor. And it was, it wasn't for the faint of heart, but I decided to take the plunge and interviewed, and it was a tough interview. I was challenged with questions about coaching the young ladies, and I was offered the job late in the summer, and I accepted. And I didn't have a whole lot of time to sort of get to work. I hadn't really had time to run a camp and get things going, and so we got started after Thanksgiving in my first year, and the expectations were still really high, but we had some ups and downs my first year, and we were actually fairly fortunate. We had a really good Comcast tournament. We lost at the end to Norwood, but we won the first game, and that got us to 10-10 and make it into the tournament. Quite frankly, with a team that some folks said to me, "Oh boy, if you can keep the tournament streak going, you're off to a good start." And that wasn't my words. And so I was really proud we were able to get into the tournament, because we'd had our ups and downs over the course of the season, and just tried to stay positive the entire year, and I did. And then was particularly excited coming into year two. We had a number of experienced girls who had gotten experience as sophomores and juniors last year, play a lot of basketball in the off season and are currently on the roster. But when the pandemic hit just before the state finals in March, it kind of we had already lost in our state tournament game, but it kind of put high school basketball on a really long hiatus, along with so many other sports and activities, and that so many kids and adults and everybody in our world partake in. And of course it went right through the spring, into the summer, and into the fall. And as you can see, high school sports this year are very restrictive. And I guess I just feel like I really haven't been able to get the kind of traction, in the girls program at Braintree that I kind of hoped I would. And it's not anybody's fault. We're all kind of powerless to what's happening in our world right now. But I was kind of hoping, I like that word. I kind of hoping I'd have a little more traction, in the program. And, we've started our season this year, and, and again, it's kind of tough we're scheduled to have a 6-week season, but some teams in our league doesn't look like they're going to have winter sports at all. And our schedule's kind of been a little wacky to start the year. We played the same team 4 times, which is bizarre.
Number 7 in the state. I mean,
yeah,
that's all.
Strong
that's all.
team. And Mo is just Mo over at Newton is just a tremendous coach and does a great job. And, it stung to take some lumps from Newton the last couple of weeks, but, and I'm trying to find that balance. That's the word I've probably been trying to keep using this entire interview, but trying to find that balance between providing these girls this season with a real meaningful experience and also trying to win some games and be competitive. And that's a really, really difficult balance to find. Very, very difficult. It's probably just about as hard as anything I've had to do in my career. Because on the one hand, you want to be thankful and grateful for every day you do have together. But, we've struggled out of the gate in the win-loss column. So, that doesn't make you feel great either. So it's been a little stressful. But I am coaching some absolutely wonderful young women at Braintree High right now. I love every single girl on that varsity team this year. And they have all displayed tremendous attitudes despite the adversity and despite the scheduling adversity. I can't say enough about the girls I'm coaching this year and how much I adore them and enjoy being around them. I just hope I can help us, push across at least a few wins this year so we can feel good about ourselves in that way too.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine as a coach, like, used to coaching the CCL, like opening up against Fenwick or Spellman in the first 4 games of the season. Like, it's awful. I mean, it's like the legit first 4 games. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, try not to dwell on it too much, but we played in the first 2 games. Then we found out we're going to be playing them again. And the final scores were such that, all right, let's gear it up, And you always want your team to feel like if you play really well, you have a chance to win. And I did feel that way.
Yeah.
But as the games slip away, all right, how am I gonna pick up the pieces the next practice? How am I gonna turn this into a positive? How am I gonna and it's not easy. It's not easy. But if I had a less headstrong group of ladies, it would be a lot harder. And they have made it really, really easy with their tremendous attitudes to come back to practice even after a few tough losses to start the season and help me see the big picture, because sometimes, it, Anthony, sometimes we coaches, we need to be recentered too. We need a little help refocusing sometimes on what's most important.
Absolutely. And again, there's no playbook on how to coach during a pandemic. I mean,
it definitely is not,
but what Braintree has is they have, especially at the girls basketball program, they have a leader who knows how to build a program and knows how to navigate through the toughest of waters. And, that's what your girls have. So you should be proud of that and understand that, as you're sitting here and you're talking about how wonderful your team is. You're thinking in advance of how you're going to pick the pieces up. I mean, they're going to buy into who you are. I mean, everyone has seen, I read your accolades, the officials know the type of guy that you are. Your school knows the type of guy you are. Your principal, you won the award for his father, Braintree. So the community knows what you're about, Matt. And I think there's no playbook for this. And I think the whole season of all sports, all the way till spring sports, it's just going to be a trial by error, and everyone's going to be doing different things. So there's no need to beat yourself up over that because you don't have the time.
I've always been my biggest critic, Anthony, as I'm sure you were as a coach.
Oh God, yeah. Oh God.
What could I be doing better? If we stop asking, it's like I told you in our pre-interview, when you stop feeling the sting of losing, it's probably time to get out of it, and I want you to think about that, because, if losses just roll off you, you probably should have had a little more. Now, on the other hand, if you're dwelling on it so much and you can't get over, that's not a good extreme either. So, I think the second half of my coaching career has really been try to stay a little bit more on an even keel and let my character come out a little bit more in terms of with my team and let them know what I'm all about and what I represent. And then whatever the scoreboard says, we'll all be able to look each other in the eye and feel proud of what we've accomplished. And that's probably not the kind of insight I had in my earlier years, but that comes with maturity and just experience. And also a lot of thinking about what you want to be. My legacy is very, very important to me. And I don't mean that just as an ego-driven thing. I think any coach's legacy should be important to them. Not a win total or not a winning percentage or not a number of championships. Just what are the first words that come to mind when your players and people that you work with, think of you? What are the first things that they think of you?
Yeah.
And if those things are for the most part positive and optimistic and uplifting, then you did a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And you invest in your players all around. I mean, I remember investing in players of going to the Department of Education and helping them get their transcripts so they can make sure that they transfer in the school, or, driving a kid, family somewhere because they needed a ride somewhere. Those are the things you do as a coach. You don't even think twice about it. And unfortunately, I think sometimes the powers of bees don't see that, right? Everything's just judged by wins and losses, and rightfully so, rightfully so. But it's amazing when you can build a good program and maybe sometimes not have that win-loss total, but you have a culture and you have good kids that represent themselves well in the school. I think sometimes those things outweigh. And when you have your hand on that, that just speaks characters about the person that you are.
Sure.
And that's going to transition us into the last question I have before our 2-minute drill today is,
Yep.
What's your advice to young coaches? What's your advice to young coaches out there that are looking to make that climb and become a head coach and take over their own program? What are some things you think these are must, these were things that helped you,
Sure.
and pass it on?
Yeah, I mean, humbly, I'm not sure I'm the most qualified to advise young coaches, but I'll do my best. I don't know. I think that, the first thing is you just have to have that work ethic right from the get-go, that, no other coach is going to outwork me. If I told you the number of cold car rides I got in over 17 years, and even with Braintree the last 2, to go scout and to go see what other teams are doing and try to take long rides to meet other coaches and swap film, and night after late into the night typing up scouting reports so I have them ready for my kids the next day. The time before practice working on individual skills with players. After practice, so kids could shoot around if they want to get extra shots up. The time spent with admin, talking about issues with a kid that came up or this that came up, and pre-game stuff, post-game stuff, talking to the press. There are so many layers to it all, and I loved every minute of it, But I didn't always win, but I never really felt like I got outworked. I lost teams to games that had more talent than us. I lost teams to games to the teams that had less talent than us, and that's going to happen. And it happened on the winning side as well. But I never really wanted to put my head to the pillow and feel like another coach was outworking me behind the scenes. So I always made sure that when I got to practice or in the game or on the weekend or whatever, for that 3.5 month period, I was, completely immersing myself in my program and thinking about ways that we could improve. And I knew that if I was doing that, whatever the scoreboard said, I was going to be able to look myself in the mirror. And I really feel that way. And I work really, really hard in Braintree. I worked hard for Rick whenever he needed me. I was there for him. And obviously as the head coach at my alma mater, I don't know if I outworked anybody else, but I'd be shocked if anybody outworked me. So I think developing that work ethic, first of all, is so critical. Having that mindset. There really isn't a lot of time off when you're running a big program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great advice to young coaches out there, and, to that looking to make that leap, man. I love doing this show because I have so many assistant coaches that listen to this, and they just talk about the things that they learn from coaches and things. And I always say, I always have a notebook of writing things down. I've written quite a few things down today. And, it's awesome, Coach. I really appreciate you coming on here. I think that you've had a heck of a coaching career. And, Braintree right now is really lucky to have you, and to coach where you teach, I think is really cool and really special. And, hopefully when we get back to normal, you can have that full off season and really working with your team and being able to go into a season and
I hope so. I hope keep wearing your masks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I guess in conclusion, if I could say one thing in conclusion,
yeah.
We talked about legacy. I think one, other than that Scully Award, one of the things I think that I'm really happy about as the years have gone on. I still get calls and texts and emails from former players I had back in 01, 02, my first year. I went out not too long ago, had dinner and drinks with a former player from 05, 06, who was a really good player. And when I see these players and they reach out to me, that just means so much. It means more than any 20-point game they ever had, I'll tell you that. And I have so many former players, as I'm sure you do, who, when I see them or talk to them or whatnot, or they reach out to me, it's just so meaningful and so heartfelt. And that's, again, another example of that being recentered and realizing why we truly do this in the first place. I love to win like anybody else does, and I hate to lose like anybody else does. That's a given. That's a given for any competitor. But what are we really doing this for? Is it just to win? And I feel fortunate to be able to honestly say, it's never just been about winning or losing to me. It really hasn't. The relationships I've made at the JV level and varsity level and assistant coach level and girls level and whatever, and the memories I've made are things that are going to stay with me for a lifetime. And regardless of what happened in that job, nobody can take that away from me. Nobody can take that away from me. And those memories and my legacy there will live on forever. And that's a very emotional thing to say, but that's how I feel.
Yeah. And I can tell, Coach, I can tell. And, and that's why I just was so intrigued about having you on here, because you just seemed like such a humble guy and just your responses in that whole situation. And
thank you.
It was like, let's make this work. So
thank you.
Again, thank you for coming on. We're going to jump into our 2-minute drill segment. If you've seen the show before, I'm just going to fire some rapid fire questions at you about the game of basketball. I do get a challenge flag. If I want to throw a challenge flag and get a little bit more of an explanation,
this wasn't in the pre-interview, Anthony, but
yeah, you got to watch the whole episode to know this comes at the end. That's what I always tell my guests. It's funny, but yeah, it's a fun segment. I get such great feedback from it, from the audience. So I'm going to set my timer, and here we go. If you could stay in one defensive set all game long, all season long, what type of defense would you play?
Man to man.
Okay. Most dominating defensive player you've ever coached at any level?
Dominating defensive player at any level?
Or any school, I should say. Any school that you coached at.
Was probably a kid I had at Feehan who went on to play at Babson, Frankie Oftring. He could change shots. He was about 6'5". He jumped real well. He played on a national championship team at Babson. He was good at both ends of the floor, but defensively, yeah, it was probably him. Yep.
Awesome. Would you rather have a dominant point or a dominant center?
I think high school basketball games largely are won and lost by your guards. So I want a kid that can handle the ball, is not going to commit turnovers, can distribute, and cares just as much about the assist as they do about the point total, and just gets as much joy out of that.
What was the hardest gym to go play in? A place was just always rocking. It was a tough atmosphere. What was the toughest place you played in?
Well, I would say in the 2000s, probably for me, was kind of my personal house of horrors was, believe it or not, Coyle Cassidy. They had a coach back then named Mike Watson, who was a tremendous high school coach. And he took a program that historically had kind of been in the doldrums, well, at least for the 80s, 90s, and whatnot. And he had a really competitive team. And there were a number of years in a row where I went down to Taunton and played there. We could just not win there. I would say by and large, though, probably was, and I only coached here a few times, it was probably Catholic Memorial. It's a narrow court. It's a historic court. They bring in the fans. They're all over you. And not to mention, they have tremendous talent, as I'm sure you know.
In any sport.
So I never beat them there. I beat them once at home, but I think I was 0-4, 0-5 in Ronnie Perry Gymnasium. Dennis just does an outstanding job.
What's the biggest difference between coaching boys and girls? And I'll give you a chance to explain this, because I know it's a tough one.
It's not like I have one thing in mind. I think for me, the toughest thing to realize was that the young ladies, they want to be challenged. They don't want to be coddled. At least the competitive, where I am, the expectations are always high. They want high expectations. They don't want you to lower the bar and treat them, quote unquote, like girls. They want you to treat them like athletes. And I've done that. I think I have. But there might have been times last year, I don't think so this year, but where I maybe was like, oh, I better be careful what I say. And that's okay, because there are times when you do have to be careful what you say to any athlete, boy or girl. But I think just selling out on the idea that largely the methods I use to coach boys are completely appropriate, if not recommended, with my female athletes as well.
Very good, Coach. Very good. What would you say the toughest coach you went against in your career?
Toughest coach I went against. Oh boy. Well, I already mentioned Coach Tobin, but we only played them a few times. Toughest coach I went against.
It could be more than one. It might be a couple.
Well, we mentioned Stang earlier. And they had a coach before Coach Santos named Coach Balistracci, and we had a very, very good record against them over the years. But he was always changing up defenses, and he always kept me on my toes, and he always made me have to think about what I wanted to do and prepare for a lot of different possibilities. That made me better. And that may have had something to do with why we had a lot of success against them, because I put a lot of time into those reports and what we wanted to do. I think Coach Houle at Attleboro, very, very good friend of mine. So we played against each other in high school. That was a natural rivalry twice a year. And it was one of those situations where you play against the same coach enough years, and we coached against each other over 35 times, in basketball. You know the other team's calls. You know their sets. You know what they like to do. You know what they don't like to do. So when you know someone that well and what they, et cetera, it's tough to throw in a lot of surprises, and it's tough to uncover, it's tough to get wrinkles by them and things of that nature. So I'll always cherish the memories of those Attleboro Feehan games. They were some of the most fun experiences of my life in coaching.
And last one I'll ask you is, what's the biggest victory in your career?
Well, number one was probably the sectional final, which it was my first one, because I had 5. That year I won the semis against Foxborough and Coach Gibbs, who I mentioned earlier, who was just a wonderful young guy. And I had lost 4 other previous semifinals. And the year after we won the sectionals, I lost another semifinal. So I've got the 6 semis, and I only won one of them. And fortunately, in 2015, when I won the semi, or we won the semi, I also won the final to get to the Garden. So, and then, and Coach Byron at Oliver Ames, that's who we beat at Brockton, is just such a first-class guy and really one of my heroes in coaching. So to be able to defeat one of your heroes in a close, hard-fought game and have him be so classy about it, it just made the whole experience wonderful. I mentioned it before, but the one time we beat CM was always etched in my mind. And we actually beat BC High one time. Coach Morelli, who has long since retired. We were down big in the first half and came all the way. We had lost them by 30 3 days earlier. We beat them at home on a buzzer beater in the lane to beat BC High. So that was a special one. Yeah, it's going way back. But so many home tournament games that we hosted. So many of them in the 2010 through 2016. We hosted the first round or 2 every one of those years. And that gym, when it's full for tournament games, it's a pretty impressive venue. And I'm not trying to go back in the memory lane, but I remember some of those games, so many of them where they had to tell people they couldn't come in because it was already packed to the gills, and it was hot, and it what a great environment for a state tournament.
Yeah.
And so I remember a game against Duxbury. I can remember a number of them, and just those tournament games. Anytime you win a tournament game, it's cause for celebration.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to play in front of the home fans too, especially we might only get that one. But Coach, you survived the 2-minute drill. Great job.
Sorry if I got a little long-winded.
No, listen, I love it. I listen, this is a platform for coaches. This is, PD for a lot of coaches, and you work hard. I'm giving you the stage. I don't care how long it takes you to get out what you need to get out. I want you to get it out. So, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and coming on here, and, to learn about you, to hear about you, the type of man that you are, job well done. This is what coaches are. These are the coaches that need to be out there and working with these kids and being that role model. And just listen how you talked about your players, and you talked about opposing coaches, and talked about former players that are now coaches. I mean, you understand that. You understand the entire thing. And I think being an educator has a lot to do with that too. So, I commend you. I thank you for coming on here. It's an honor having you on here. And
I say thank you to you, Anthony, and thank you to Beyond X's and O's. I think what you're doing is a real service. And I'm planning on, maybe when the season's over, going back and watching some of the other episodes you had. I think it's going to spark an interest. I hope you're able to really build an even greater following and bring in a lot of real good people, and I hope to be able to support you in any way that I can.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's the plan. We want to grow every week, and our audience is growing. I'm getting great feedback, and we're just excited. To me, this is a passion of mine to be able to talk about the 2 things I love the most, which is one of the 2 things I love the most. I didn't say the thing I love the most, but coaching and working with youth. To be that role model, to be that person that they look up to, and to lead them the right way. That's a huge responsibility. You're parallel with parents and trying to make sure that the kids are learning things the right way and doing things the right way and representing themselves both on the field and off the field the way that you expect them to. And that's tough. And some coaches might not, some coaches might not think that, but that's a tough thing to do. And I think there's so many great coaches out there who learn how to balance all of that. And I'm lucky to get them on the show and have had them on so far.
Well, I've tried, and sometimes I've tried and sometimes I've failed, but overall I'm doing okay.
Yeah, you're doing great. You're doing great, Coach. So from Beyond Podcast, again, Matt, thank you for coming on today. From Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis. Until next week, thanks so much.